of August 28th, 2024 to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of city staff or consultants may be participating via teleconference. Today's meeting may be viewed on YouTube, Facebook, and following the meeting on cable channel 10 HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation on action items. We have no action items on our agenda today. As I had mentioned last month at our workshops, I will invite members of the council to report on the advisory boards, commissions, and committees on which they are an ex officio, and also the county and community boards they serve on behalf of the city. Displayed on the screen in just a second will be a list of our council members and their ex officio and service roles as approved on January 2nd, 2024. And I would open up an invitation to all council members present as well as participating via Zoom that wish to give a brief report on those committees at this time. Yeah, Councilmember Stuckey.
So I serve on two committees. They're kind of related, the LTAC committee and the Island County Tourism Committee. LTAC is getting ready to ramp up. That's a lot of work at a short time frame, and the rest of the time is kind of not spent doing that, we'll put it that way. So we just approved, I believe, $458,000 for this next cycle. We are meeting on September 5th to have our initial meeting, and then from there we will have applications go out and then review those. So more to come, not a whole lot thus far. The other one is the Island County Tourism Board. And that, as I mentioned a couple meetings ago, we're working on becoming a 501c6. So we're working on language with that in the interlocal. A lot of it has to do with the marketing we are doing and participating in. So if you go on a PBS, you'll see some ads from us. We've also worked on some commercials. A lot of what we do, which was difficult for me to grasp, you will not see because we pay for a program called Datafy, which tracks your cell phones. So we can see when someone visits the island for the first time ever based on their cell phone. And most of the advertisements we have are based on people who are not here. So what may look like we don't do a whole lot because we living here don't see these advertisements and things like that. They're mostly marketed to people off island. And the final thing we're working on through Datafy is being able to have better tracking for events to help with those LTAC grants. So if you're going to the music festival, we'll be able to see how many people was this their first time coming ever to Whidbey Island. We've got that data is during the music festival time frame, so we can figure out how many people are coming because of that, or at least coming at the same time. So a lot of data tracking, a lot of advertising, more to come.
That's interesting. Thanks. Anyone else for the good of the order? Yes, Councilmember Arms.
The Marine Advisory was on Monday, and we have changed the date for the 50th anniversary to September 21st. We went over the finances with Dave Goldman, and so a lot of that was clarified, and then looking at the rates for the marina, knowing that we're not going to change them. It's on a 3-year stance, and so that's the main thing with them, and they had some ideas of how to better put their efforts together. It's kind of like what Brian does with the park board, having different committees to work on different projects, and so that was the main gist of that one.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Arms. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Island Transit, we are voting on Friday on the 2024 to 2029 Transit Development Plan. It's our 5-year working document has to be submitted to WashDOT. We're also in the process of seeking a new executive director, and so that is in works. With the parks, we had a field trip a couple weeks ago, Brian, down to Centralia to the sports complex down there. Got a chance to meet with some of their park staff, take a look at what they're doing. We went to a couple inclusive playgrounds on the way back. Got a chance to see a couple different designs and layouts with that, and there's some really good information that came from that. Working on the pickleball plan concept and making progress there. And Brian's got a lot going on with the Parks Department, and so doing a great job there. So appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Thank you, Mayor. Wow, that seems loud today. Hey, everybody, how's it going? I sit on, it looks like 3, Arts Commission, Investment Committee, and the CAB, Community Advisory Board for the Police Department. CAB is working on survey data coming in and kind of seeing and assessing our needs. It's a reinstated committee, and so it's fun and enjoy doing it. Arts Commission is working on their arts plan. That's primarily the big focus, a lot of discussion about different things and how to work with art in our community and how the city's involved with all that. Brian's doing a great job there too. We appreciate that, Brian. And Investment Committee, I've been to one. We have another one. I think they meet quarterly, and that'll give us some updates, kind of knowing where our investments are as a city as well. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. And don't you guys have a huge groundbreaking this week too?
Yeah, there's one tomorrow in Flintstone Park for the angel statue. Yep. Sorry, forgot about that.
No, that's good. All right. Anyone else? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I serve on 2 of these committees. The ARPA Ad Hoc Committee, myself, Councilor Wiesner, and Councilor Heisen sit on that committee. It has more or less ran its course at this point, but that's something where we met at least every 2 months throughout that. And I think there was $6.5 million-ish, roughly, David. Okay, that's a close enough ballpark there for now. We were able to use that money to really move the city ahead in a lot of different areas, get going on some critical infrastructure, and just kind of a one-time shot in the arm. And it was really a pleasure to serve on that community and or on that committee, and to continue to serve as we finish that up, I'm sure. The other committee is the Law Enforcement Officer and Firefighter Disability Board. Myself and Councilor Heisen are on that. I think we meet quarterly and to review benefits and requests. That committee is set up to where we can have votes online, which is kind of handy to expedite needs there. Other than that, when it comes to different hiring committees that we've had over the years, or interviewing consultants, always ready to serve any way as needed. All of these committees are at the pleasure of the mayor, and I certainly appreciate his confidence in continuing the committees that I was previously on, and look forward to continuing to serve any way we can, and think that this opportunity for council to give an update on these is pretty marvelous. Thank you.
All right. I can't see Mayor Pro Tem. Does she want to talk to anything? I don't want to ignore her. Yeah, she's online. She's good? She's not saying,
Right.
okay. All right.
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Oh,
There she is.
hi.
Thank you, Mayor and staff, for kind of creating space for council to do this. I know we're supposed to kind of keep everybody updated, but yeah, there's never really a specific time set aside to do that. So I appreciate this and hope it can be an ongoing thing. There's some exciting things coming up with the Clean Air Agency, but I'm gonna, I think, wait until maybe next month's workshop, maybe the one after, because we've got some really exciting stuff in the works, and I kind of want to wait until it's launched to announce it. So I just wanted to say thanks for creating the space to do this, and I'll get back to you.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. All right. With that, we will turn it over to council now for any comments or questions, concerns you may have. Councilmember Stuckey.
Just a request, I believe that all of my colleagues got that email from our city attorney about the salary commission regarding no? Yes? Yeah? Well, my thought was maybe looking at modifying that a little bit. So the mayor appoints a salary commission chooses our salaries, and in turn, council chooses the mayor's salary. But I would like that, if there's no objections, to be added to a future meeting for discussion.
Workshop meeting.
Yeah, I mean, workshop meeting, however we feel, just to look at that as an option, see if that's something we'd be considering pursuing.
Got it. Anyone else? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
I would like that, along with any other recommendations from staff and legal on how we can better the process. Thank you.
Anybody else for the good of the order? Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Just for clarification, do we want that to be a workshop like on a Wednesday in a month, or do we want that to be a special workshop? Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And I'm always open for discussion and conversations, so I'd be in favor of that.
Thank you, Councilmember Wittgenstein. Anybody else for the good of the order? Any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, hearing none, we're going to move right along to the monthly departments report. We will have our city administrator, Sabrina Combs, present at this time.
Good afternoon, council. Tim, can you pull up the presentation? So I'm just going to change this up a bit this month and give you a couple of slides to look at for some of the things that you saw in the report. So first of all, the report format, we're always working on updating it and changing some of the items that you see in there. So you will see some changes to some of the items, like the Parks and Recreation Department putting a little more detail for you about what's going on with their programs. We also are adding the commission meetings to make that easier so that you can see those. Some of the key projects that staff is working on, these are only just a few of the tons of projects that our teams are working on, but we have the budget that we're all working on, the arts plan, our comprehensive plan, the police department survey that's been going out, some construction projects that are happening around the city, and then adding office space to City Hall. So we've talked about this before, but what we did is you can see the before of our supply room here in City Hall. We've now converted that to 2 offices for the finance department because we were running out of room. And then we took the supply area and converted the alcove out in front of the executive department and converted that into a supply area. That's working really well for our staff. Everything's available to folks, and it also freed up, like I said, some office space so that we could put those staffers up on this floor with the finance department. Then we had some staff engagement. We have the wellness luncheon, which these photos are featuring. It was a really good time for staff. Everybody had a lot of fun. Some of you were there and enjoyed the activities that were available. I want to thank the Wellness Committee for the work that they put into this. And then we also sat down with our labor management teams this week and really just last week and talked about what's going on in the unions and what we can do to improve that. So it was a really great quarterly meeting that Emma sets up, and I really appreciate the time to talk with staff about what they need and the shop stewards. Then I want to thank all of you for supporting the WCMA conference. I included a lot of information in the report about some of the conference topics and items that were discussed. It was a great time for networking, training, as well as learning about some of the key issues that are going on. For me personally, as a Northwest Women's Leadership Academy graduate, I was also a mentor this last year, and my group presented. They won the opportunity to present through their presentation, and so I got to be there to support them as their mentor. And so it was a lot of fun to see their really creative presentation on communications and how to deal with misinformation. Then an added item that was not in the report is I've had some requests from council regarding our advisory boards. And what we want to do is address those by working as staff to enhance the application process so that we set an application review period, extend that a little longer so that there are more candidates in a group that you're looking at, add some questions to the applications, share those received applications with you when we receive them in the executive office, add interviews either with the advisory boards or here at council, and then increase the promotion of those. So Maggie's going to be working on that. So we will see more information coming to you because it does require some updates to the ordinance and bylaws. So we'll be looking at that. And then with that, we need your help. We can promote it as much as we want, but we know you can help us promote or suggest people. So here are some of the current openings we have that we need to fill. So take a look at that, and if you have some ideas, let us know. We are happy to, if you want to send those to Julie, Julie can send those off to those individuals and encourage them to apply. But the goal here is to get more applicants in these positions. So with that, I want to see if you have any questions.
Question to comment. One question on the development report, the pickleball courts. As I understand, we have a grant in for those 8 pickleball courts, correct?
Yeah, we do. Brian's here.
How far in the process do we go until we know for a fact that that funding is secured?
Right now, we're in design. We're going from 30% to 60%, and we'll finish out everything in that scope for the design process, and then we'll wait. We should only have a couple weeks before we know if our application is going forward or not.
Sure.
Award will be in October, but we should know a bit before then.
But of course, there's no building or construction or anything like
No.
that till we grant.
We've done geotech work and surveying and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And right now, we're in the permitting, and we have a pre-application meeting coming up on Tuesday.
Okay. In the comment, I love the idea of putting a little bit more into who is on those boards. Not to necessarily eliminate people, but I kind of use my story of, there's one commissioner who I know quite well, we'll just say that. She applied, she found out she got on because it was on a consent agenda. There was never anything other than that. And I feel like that kind of devalues some of these positions because we want to have the help, we love volunteers, we want to make sure it's a good fit, and there should be a couple of questions, and not too many hoops, but there should be some interview process or some questions to go through. So I like the idea of having a little bit of screening, if only to give more value to those people who got on there as well. Because it's not like, oh, hey, anyone who applies is just on, So I love the idea of putting a little bit more into those. So.
And we appreciate the idea and concept of this and working with us on this. It's going to take some time for staff to put that together.
sure.
One of the features on our website is we can actually say, if you click, say, Planning Commission, we can add questions specific to that actual advisory board so that we're asking questions around that topic.
And a lot of it, as you said, comes on us to just ask people. I mean, you put something on a website and say anyone can apply, you'll get some people. If you go to somebody personally, you think, I think you would be a good fit for this, you should consider going on that. I think that puts a lot more value into it, and people are a lot more likely to do so. So it definitely is incumbent on all of us to, kind of go out there and suggest people who are a good fit and talk to them. So, thank you.
I just have a question, clarification. So the person that we're talking about, I thought they were contacted by McHale and notified that they were being put on that committee. Is that not true?
No, we have one person that was currently in the process, had already been, had told that she was going to go into consent agenda to be confirmed by council. So that one we are moving forward on because we got this request after that notification.
Right. I was just speaking to his point, though. He was saying that she didn't know anything about it.
I was referring to my wife.
Oh,
But I did
Okay,
not.
that's why I was like, is it the same?
This is a little bit, I apologize.
No, it's okay.
We have the same last name, but I try not to lean on that. So that's who I was referring to.
Okay, because, I wasn't aware of that, so. All right, anyone else? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, just real quick on that same fold. I think there's a lot of value in having somebody, stand at the podium or even online on Zoom, I guess, but really like it if it's in person. Just, to tell council for 2 or 3 minutes why they think they would be a good fit, why they want to be on the commission. I think there's a lot of value in that for us, but also to have them in the same room and to see all 7 of us plus the mayor. Maybe it create, starts a relationship to where we can work together a little better. Small town, we know most everybody, at least by name. Maybe we don't recognize them face to face. So if there was a way to at least, maybe not require, but encourage them to come in and, give us a couple minutes spiel of why they want to be on the commission, I think that would be of some value too. So thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember, one of the ideas was saying that when they come into the meeting, either we do it with the specific advisory board, or what we do is bring them in here, and then the ex officio that's reporting to that specific advisory board has a couple of questions that they get to ask on behalf of council.
That sounds marvelous. Thank you.
Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Also kind of on the same thing. How many times have we turned an applicant away because we had too many?
I would say that's not an issue that we typically have. In fact, Mikhail did a great job of talking to me about, let's look at the numbers that we've had in the past. So we were looking at that. And so again, that comes back to all of us need to do a better job of encouraging folks. And that's where we talked about ways that we can promote this differently, and also get more information out to the public and have those opportunities where when you're talking to somebody, you can say, hey, thanks for your information. I'm going to have Julie send you that information. The city clerk will send that to you. And then you can get information about how you can apply. So we're going to try to increase that process a little bit.
Okay, that's great. That's kind of what I just want to make sure we're not, spending valuable time doing repetitious things that may not necessarily be needed all the time. So I think there's definitely a way to acknowledge those that are accepted, other than just you apply and it looks like you're in type deal. I think that's appropriate. If we have a surplus of people applying, and then absolutely bring them in and maybe do some interviews in that regards. But if they're willing to show up and there's an open spot and the mayor's already kind of gone through that process to approve, then to encourage them to, I'm glad it's not forced, but to encourage them just to come in to have conversations other than to be recognized for their volunteerism, I think would be time wasted.
Yeah, I think part of the why we want to look into this a little bit more is we're giving you a heads up, but we also want to be prepared for if in that 30 to 90 day period we don't get as many applications, what is our process with you to come to you and say, we only have one so far, do you want us to move forward, how would you like to proceed? So just looking at how we would move those applications through. So again, we're going to take some time and just review that process and make sure we update those ordinances and bylaws accordingly.
Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing. you are-
Mayor Pro Tem has.
Oh, I'm sorry,
raised.
Mayor Pro Tem.
That's okay. You're okay. I just wanted to say thank you for the level of detail that's in the reports. It seems like the level of detail just continues to increase every time we get one of these. And I love being able to see not just what the departments are up to, but what specific programs are up to. I realize that that's labor intensive, but it's really useful and interesting. And I really liked that you included so much information about the conference that you attended. I kind of, felt like I was there along for the journey, learning stuff along with you. So that was all really fascinating and really interesting. And I would always rather have too much information than not enough. So keep it coming.
Thank you. And I also want to just thank all the directors in the departments because they've been doing a good job of highlighting staff and some of the work they're doing. And I think it helps all of us see some of the things that are going on from that staff perspective. So that's been a really great addition to these reports.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, Sabrina, and you're up next with the city council priorities.
Don't move. Stay put. So Mikhail's going to pull up a graphic. So as we included in the agenda packet, we took the information that you had discussed in the last mini retreat we had around this, and what we did was highlight the subhead matter with additional detail. And what we're working on is this is the chart that we talked about that walks through the different pieces of information for you of what we're working on under these categories. And the goal here is that on our different ways of presenting this to the public, whether it's the website, social media, flyers and posters around offices, this is where we could check off this list and show the community that we're working towards these items. So this is the next step in that process. So we'd have the detailed list. We could click on an item, let's say dredging. If you clicked on that item on the website, it would take you to additional information and you'd be able to learn more about that program. So that is the goal of this. So if this is working in the right path forward, then we'd like to complete this and bring this for approval as an action at the next meeting and then move forward on these items as we're working towards budget items as well.
Councilmember Stuckey.
This would be in the next packet then?
That was our plan. If
Okay,
there's,
okay. No, I do like it. It would have been a little nice to have it in this packet it is what it is.
Well, and it's a tentative drawing, and
Sure.
so we didn't want to get everybody
I get it.
focused on this as an absolute done deal. We wanted you to be able to look at it in this meeting, and if you had feedback or comments, that we could make those changes and then put it in the packet. But I can also put it in the next packet so you have a little more time with it.
Or it can be email. I mean, I like it. I'm trying to read it all. I like the format, if that's the question. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Does this feel like a good way of showcasing that?
Yes, but I need to get a little more into the nitty gritty of what's on
Okay.
it. So.
So, Mikhail, if you could just send this out electronically or hand everyone a paper copy before they leave today, so that way they have it and they have all the time they need with it. Councilmember Wiggenstein. Okay. Anybody else? For the good of the order, this is it. All right, we are going to move on. Thank you, Sabrina.
Perfect, thank you.
Development Services, the 2025 Comprehensive Plan and Climate Change Updates. And here to introduce is our Principal Planner, Kak Kamak.
All right. Good afternoon, CAC-COMAC Principal Planner. What I'm going to do, the topic on the agenda is the 2025 periodic update to the comprehensive plan. So I'll just make some introductory remarks as the council, and then I will hand it over to our consultants. As the council is aware, we hired consultants to do this work. This is a state mandate, and there was some state funding, and so we did apply for those grants and get that money, and so we are using that and using the consultants to do our update. The council is familiar with the topic that we're discussing. It's mostly the lands capacity analysis and the housing needs analysis that we're going to be focusing on today. However, the consultants will give you a little overview on where we are in the process and talk about the general comp plan as well. And maybe we can even talk about what's coming up. I just want to inform the council that we had met with the Planning Commission yesterday and talked about this, and it was a good discussion. I spent some time, giving them the history. We had some new commissioners, and we talked about and gave them the context under which we're talking about this. So I won't spend the time doing that here because I think council knows where we are in the process and ready to dive into it. I know Councilmember Marshall was there last night. After today's discussion, if you feel like there's anything that from the Planning Commission discussion needs to be brought up, I'd be happy to bring that up. And if there's any more clarifications we could do that as well. Without further ado, I will introduce our consultants. From Kimley Horn, we have Clay White and Joel Faria. And I'll have them come to the table, and if there are questions, I'll come back for answering.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors. It's wonderful to be in front of you today, and grateful for the opportunity to discuss a little bit about the 2025 comprehensive plan update. So just some briefing objectives. We'll spend a little time just to provide a little bit of a project overview so we can kind of put these housing issues in context. We'll review the project tasks and schedule, just really high level. And then we're going to really focus in on, one of the big things we're going to be working on as part of this update is how to accommodate growth, and that's specifically housing. And so we've got some kind of preliminary options that we'd like to go through with you today and get some feedback. It may help us as the planning team as we continue to coordinate with the county, or if you meet with the county as well, and we're here to answer any questions. I want to frame this up really quick for you, though, as we go through kind of three different kind of high-level scenarios for kind of growth planning. Any direction that you provide us isn't binding to some future decision. However, we're at a point in the comprehensive plan where we need to start studying how growth will impact traffic, capital facilities, utilities, parks, all of these different things. And so at some point, we'll be going down in a certain direction. Now, in the end, you can make all the decisions that you want in terms of, land use changes you make or zoning or code changes, but that's the kind of the separator is we're looking at some point to get some direction so we can continue the path of planning for growth for the city. So hopefully that makes some sense, and we'll talk about some options today. So just a little bit about the periodic update overview. So growth management is our fundamental planning law. It was set up to be a bottoms-up planning process, which is kind of like this balancing act. You've got state law requirements that we have to meet. Specifically, we're looking at modifying policies and regulations consistent with things that have changed since the last time that you updated the plan. So there are some state law items that we have to address, such as housing. But the bottoms-up piece is that you should be able to do it in a way that's specific to Oak Harbor. That the city of Oak Harbor is different than the city of Ellensburg, is different than the city of Seattle, different than the city of Cheney. So as we look to develop policies and an approach to planning for growth, you have to mix that community input and vision, what the vision of the Planning Commission, the City Council, and all that community, and work that into your approach to planning for growth, because there's significant challenges, and these are not easy planning tasks that we're taking on. So part of the update is updating critical areas consistent with best available science, but you've completed a recent update to your critical areas ordinance. Our goal is to complete the project by June of 2025. The legislature did provide some additional time to extend it to where you have some more time, but we'd love to be able to get done in advance of you going through budgeting and all of those things that happen in the fall. So we're still focused on that goal. Discussed it a little bit, but the major changes, this is maybe like the fourth cycle for comprehensive planning. So in the first couple, there's a lot of things to figure out, densities and uses, and there's a lot of case law that went through and a lot of things that have been settled. Now we're really focusing on, it's not a new comprehensive plan, you're really updating it. You really are looking out an additional 20 years. And so I think that what happens is you can really focus in on, hey, here are the 3 or 4 big items that are really going to be focused on. We do have the new climate and resiliency element. We're working on that right now. We'll be beginning some community engagement, and we'll come and talk to the council about our initial work when we kind of get to that step. Housing legislation has been really big over the last few years, middle housing. So there's going to be some requirements that aren't due until right after the comprehensive plan update, 6 months after, to be accommodating more infill development, residential infill development, including accessory dwelling units and duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes within existing residential neighborhoods. So there's going to be some requirements to plan for more infill. If you have any questions on that, we're assisting the state with some of the statewide guidance, but there are some challenges as you work through that. And then, of course, the big piece that we're here. So when growth management was set up, when you're planning for for growth, you're planning out 20 years. In the past, it was really focused on needing to show that you have enough zoned capacity to accommodate how many people were moving to your community. So you could do a land capacity analysis, we'll talk about it today, and just show we have enough capacity, we're good to go. The new housing element requirements really make it a more granular process, because it's not about just showing that you have enough capacity, but it's showing that you have enough capacity for the housing types that fit with people making different incomes. And so you might find out, as we've kind of found out, that you have enough capacity in your lower density zones for single-family detached housing, but that you need more capacity for housing types like multifamily, which would reach people that make less income. It's made it more challenging. The other thing is it really emphasizes the focus of growth occurring more within cities than outside of cities, because when you show that you need denser housing, that can't happen in rural areas, because that's not where you have public sewer and all of the infrastructure. So that's kind of a byproduct. So not only are you planning, is the planning more granular and it's more complicated, but it also is going to focus more growth within cities, which is presenting the big challenge that we have as we do this update. So I won't go through this, but I just wanted to make sure that we're always checking back that this is kind of our high-level schedule. We are starting to do some community engagement with our community engagement survey. We've got a committee, OACPAC, that we'll be working with to help engage the community. And we've completed several steps, including the plan audit, our land capacity analysis, and our housing needs assessment. So we're at the point now where you kind of transition, and the first thing you do is kind of figure out existing conditions, like what's going on with the city right now, and then you transition in to bridge the gap between where you are and what you have to plan for in the future. So we're right at that transition point, which is why we're here to talk about, the process we're going to use to plan for the growth you're anticipating. So let's talk a little bit about housing targets. And I know many of you were at the joint meeting with the county a few months ago, and we went through some of this in terms of the planning challenge. My eyes aren't even good enough to see the the table in front of you, but we'll go through this a little bit. So the state, so because of the new housing requirements, the Department of Commerce went through a process to figure out how much growth our counties and the cities in the county need to plan for, breaking that out into housing units that you would have to plan for, and then figuring out affordability across the state. And so you'd have a number of housing units that you'd have to plan for in each community by area median income. So this snapshot is of a tool that the state put together called the HAP tool. And based upon the targets that were allocated within the countywide planning policies, the city would be planning for about 5,500 new housing units. Now that's significant because the city really only has about 10,000 housing units right now. So that's a 50% increase in housing. But the challenge isn't just about providing capacity for those housing units. You can see that it's broken down by different area median income brackets. And what Joel will talk a little bit about is there's housing types that fit with those brackets. So it gets complex. So that's the challenge that kind of lies ahead, is how are we going to plan for 5,500 units? And just kind of highlighting that a lot of it is below 80% area median income. So once you get probably to like 100%, you're getting away from single family detached housing. So you're thinking about, when you're below that, you're looking at attached housing types, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, multifamily, affordable housing incentives, doing all the things that you can do to hit at those price points. And there's only certainly certain things the city controls. So absolutely. Sure.
When it comes to that available land study, what all goes into that? I guess the reason I ask is we have so much land on the military base that is in city limits that maybe it ties into some land swap down the road. Is that something that would be looked at throughout this?
We are going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, but there's a methodology that was set out with Island County on kind of the methodology to complete the study. There are some parcels where, there's limitations on what can be built right now. If those circumstances change, then it would become capacity that would be available for development. If it's not something that can be developed now, we couldn't anticipate and say, capacity may open up in 10 years when X things happen. But for all the things that are available, we certainly did count those as being available for future development.
I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll go through a little bit of it, high level of what we did, and then we'll take more questions for sure.
If I can jump in to clarify about the base. The seaplane base is in the city, but it does not have any zoning because we don't have any authority for development or to do anything there. So the entire seaplane base is not included in our capacity analysis because we don't have any zoning authority there. So it would have to change. That would have to change in order for that capacity to become available to the city.
That makes tons of sense. I do hope that it can change someday. Thanks.
I appreciate the clarification. 'Cause there's also some areas that are in the city that are impacted, the type of development that can occur in terms of densities as well. So we had to account for that. So some of the just challenges we've kind of talked about, shifting a significant amount of growth from the county to the city. So that because you're the large city in the county, you always were going to plan for a good amount of growth, but with state law changes, it puts that burden even more. That we're looking to provide sufficient capacity for housing types that align with people making different incomes. Considering the approach to zoning in unincorporated urban growth areas. So how much, part of the exercise we're doing is how much capacity exists, what can we do to increase capacity, how much is left, and then how do we work with the county so that they can plan for some additional growth. And then that communication with the county. The best thing that could happen in the near term is we understand what our challenge is, we go do that work. The county understands what that challenge is, they go do their work, so that when we get all done with our plans, we've together, we've met that kind of goals that we have to. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel that's going to talk a little bit about the housing land capacity analysis.
Yeah, so actually that was a good segue to your question, to talk about the actual definition of a land capacity analysis. But a land capacity is really an analysis to find the existing capacity for housing and employment in the city limits, using the existing zoning and the existing zoning regulations. So at that point, it's really just an existing conditions capacity analysis for growth that could potentially and could happen in the city. And just a couple points on that, just to show a little bit more about the housing targets. But these targets were set by the Island County countywide planning policies. I'll refer to those as CPPs from now on, but those set the growth that you see at the bottom bar, which we also saw in the last couple slides. And they set them by income band based on their legislation. The legislation specific is House Bill 1220, which regulates, it included the extremely low and very low, and planning for housing needs for those lower income brackets. I think, yeah, let me change that. So the existing LCA findings found that there was capacity for 2,474 dwelling units within the existing city limits and existing zoning, which is a shortfall of 3,059 dwelling units. There wasn't a population target placed along with the dwelling units, but using the current average household size, we're able to multiply that by the housing shortfall to find kind of approximate number of how many people that would leave, that would be the shortfall of people, and that's 7,920 people. Employment capacity found that there was sufficient capacity for employment. That uses both commercial zones and industrial zones, the capacity in those two zones. The rate of employees calculated per acre vacant and partially vacant for those zones is different. There's more for commercial zones than industrial zones as regulated by the CPPs. The bigger issue, as Clay mentioned earlier, is that the housing shortfall, when you're comparing it by income bands, shows that at the very bottom of this table, that when you look at the capacity that the city of Oak Harbor has for between 80 to 120% of the AMI, there's only a deficit of 406 dwelling units. But the real deficit comes when you look at the capacity between 0 to 80%. Households making 0 to 80% of the area median income, which is 2,654 dwelling units. That's kind of the focus of the options that we're going to talk about later, is really trying to bridge the gap, not for the 80+% AMI, but for the below 80% of the AMI. Just wanted to clarify that before we keep going. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, just to dive a little deeper on the area median income findings. Again, Commerce guidance kind of gives a lot of guidance to how to actually calculate the AMI and like the housing types. So what was used here, what guidance through using Commerce was stuff like townhomes and detached single-family homes really are only affordable to people making above 80%, above 100% AMI, and the current zoning in Oak Harbor, the R1, R2, and R3, like you really can't build anything besides, like that's like pretty much the highest density use you can use. There might be some walk-up apartments that can be built, but those will generally be larger and more expensive. So a lot of the, as shown on the zones part of the table, a lot of the 0 to 80% AMI was filled in by the R4 and the CBD, like mixed-use zones. There's different use, when you put two different uses on one parcel, generally, you can put more affordable residential on them. And as I said before, the largest deficiencies, which is the red parentheses on the very right of this table, is between the 0 to 30, the 30 to 50, and the 50 to 80%. I don't think I talked about this here, I wasn't in here, but the AMI that was used for these calculations was set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which set Island County's AMI at 102,000, which is the area median income. And as you can see, the income brackets, the 0 to 30%, $0 to $30,600, and goes up that way. Generally, I think I finished with this. Yeah, I think we went through all the results for this, but you could see for the highest over 120% AMI, it's really just R1, R2, and R3 zones that the housing types allowed in those zones are the ones allowing the housing types that people in that AMI bracket could afford. And in those 3 zones is where the most capacity was in the city of Oak Harbor, which is why these the results are what they are. Like, yeah, under the current regulations, that's where almost all of the capacity was. So you're going to see in the next 3 options that most of our options were focused on the R1 zone and the C3 zone, which is the other very large capacity zone in the city. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Clay for the next couple slides.
Awesome. So I'll start by saying, like, the challenge that the city faces is the challenge that every city is facing in terms of where they have a target that they're trying to accommodate. Typically, you're going to find the capacity rests in zones that are lower density, and because there's such a housing need for people making below median income, the need is going to be where you don't have the capacity. So you have a mix here, but it's not a unique challenge. So you're definitely not in this alone. So the land capacity analysis gives you a snapshot of where you are. You know, here's the target that you're planning for, and you figure out, like, how much capacity to accommodate that growth do we have. Where there's a shortfall, then you'd say, well, then what would we do about that? You know, what would be the steps? And this is part of every comprehensive plan update. It can be zoning changes. It could be changes to your bulk standard regulations to allow more density or uses or just change things. So at this point, what we want to do, instead of saying, here's what we think you should do, we wanted to provide you, like, bookends. So you can kind of see, like, here's maybe the least that you would do if you want to take that approach. Here's maybe some of the most things that you could do to be proactive. So we can get feedback and go through, like, the pros of those things maybe, or what the drawbacks might be. And so you can kind of get a sense of, and then we'd love to get some feedback from all of you. So this also helps because, you know, once we kind of pick a direction that we're heading in, it's going to help form how we, you know, provide community engagement. So what we can talk about with the community so we can get feedback, which is going to be really important as well. So again, just want to reiterate that any feedback you provide at this point helps us start doing the studying. And we don't want to go too far because we don't want to go and redo that work later if you made drastic changes, but you're not committing to any particular outcome. We're just giving us some direction to move forward. So we have 3 options that we'll kind of look like, and we've kind of put those out as options 1, 2, and 3. So option 1 would be kind of just utilizing existing conditions, utilize existing housing and population capacity within the city. We wouldn't make any zoning or land use changes. And so it would just kind of be just extending what you have right now. And so, you know, if we did that, we'd still have the shortfall of about 3,000 housing units. And you have to figure out, you know, with the county of where those housing units would go. Option 2 would be focus on modifying development standards like building height, lot coverage, required parking, and open space. So this is intended to be an approach to a future transition to a form-based code, and I think that you've talked about that before. So this would be like, instead of making a bunch of zoning changes, it would be changing, like, standards that would allow more capacity on existing lots. And so doing that would reduce the shortfall significantly down to about 2,400 units. And then option 3 would be include modifying the bulk standard requirements, so everything in option 2, plus looking at some rezones of property to increase some densities. And we'll show you a map today of some areas that you might look at. I want to make sure it's really clear that to establish how much you might reduce the target, we had to, like, kind of analyze parcels, the ones that may be most likely to redevelop. But we're not showing you, like, it's this map. I mean, you might go, no, not those 5 parcels, and why didn't you think of these ones? And we don't have to make any of those decisions today, but it's just gave you, like, a target to be able to kind of be considering those. Now, if we did that, you know, we pick up some more units, but you still have a shortfall of 2,000 units. And I feel like the big thing is to show your work, and we've talked about this, is we've done a land capacity analysis, we used a good methodology, we're looking at all the options, we're showing our work, and that still provides a shortfall. And then that's something that we'd have to talk about with the county on how that's going to be accommodated. So a little bit about option one. Again, this is kind of like we're not going to take any additional actions. It's the quickest and easiest to implement. It doesn't preclude you from taking future actions, but it wouldn't be necessary as part of this update. And we have to show as part of this update how we're going to get the capacity we need. And it has fewer code or comprehensive plan map changes. But the possible disadvantage is it leaves a significant housing and population shortfall, and it would require significant growth to happen within the urban growth area. And, that has costs too. I mean, it's capital facilities and utilities and how you're going to serve it. There's a lot of studying that would need to happen if you're going to do it right. And I think about things like you may have capacity for enough employment, but if you're going to put housing out in the urban growth area, you're also going to want to have some jobs and retail and other things with it. So you can think like that's a pretty big planning exercise if you're going to do it right. And we'd have to agree on that option with Island County. So we still don't know yet if growth is going to happen within the unincorporated urban growth area. We don't know if an urban growth area expansion is going to be necessary or not. But it may be harder to justify an urban growth area expansion if we're not taking a bunch of measures within the city first. I guess lastly on this one too is a lot of the housing that's going to be necessary, whether it's in the city or it's in the urban growth area, we're going to need more multifamily housing. It's also, you have to think about where do you want multifamily housing to occur? Putting it in the urban growth area, if you don't have all the services, transportation with it, you certainly maybe don't want higher density housing further away from transportation choices, further away from jobs, further away from retail. And so even thinking a little deeper about where you're planning growth and how it aligns with all the other things that you're trying to plan for, parks and everything else.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yes.
One more quick question for you. So when the state passes down this legislation, and I guess maybe we wait to see which shoes drops next as certain communities figure out whether this is doable or not. Is there? I don't know why there's that echo. Is there any thought at the state legislature that they may start to allow, say a shoestring annexation like they would in a lot of other communities, to where that highway for a quarter of a mile can be what considers you contiguous to the city, that would allow you to expand into that UGA, to where maybe there is a land. A certain portion of land that prevents that from being contiguous, but it ends up being, here in Oak Harbor, 25 years ago, we had Fireside that expanded into Swantown Ridge and into Waterside and Fairway Point and Howard Point. I think there's something else out there. So I mean, that's probably a huge chunk of houses, and it happened in 5 or 6 different developments. Mm-hmm. It seems like a lot to consider in one, but I mean, I really think having it in one is probably what it's going to take. And is there any help that as electeds we can do, encouraging the state legislature for any type of help like that?
I mean, non-contiguous UGAs or expansions or annexations are a challenge. I think if you're really just following what the Growth Management Act would say, it would say your unincorporated urban growth areas, all of it would be expected to be annexed within the planning period, and not just portions of it. It doesn't, regardless of whether annexations occur, the capacity, we would still have to plan for that capacity. But I think that there are also more annexation options than there were a few years ago of ways to annex. But I think that there's some challenges if we're looking at taking only pieces. Some of it I have to look at, like the countywide planning policy as well. Sometimes there's direction in those regional policies about, how you have to take certain pieces together and how that would go. So I don't quite know the answer, but I could get you an answer to that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's option one. So option two, this is the one where we're looking at more code changes, like bulk standard changes. It increases housing and population capacity beyond existing conditions. So it would show that we're taking some measures beyond existing capacity. It doesn't preclude future planning to increase capacity, but again, it doesn't happen as part of the update, which is something that we have to show our work on that. There's fewer code and comprehensive plan changes than option 3. Less growth within the urban growth area, still significant though. They would have to happen somewhere besides the corporate boundaries of the city. There's an opportunity to put more housing closer to where jobs and transportation exist. So if we're increasing some densities strategically or bulk standards, you could get more housing within the city, close to where people live, work, and play. And it may be easier to agree with this option with Island County about who's planning for what growth. But we still have a significant shortfall. It still requires a lot of growth within the urban growth area. And again, if there's other things that we can do, it would be harder to kind of show our work on a urban growth area expansion. Option 3 is kind of the other end of the bookend. Now, we've done a lot of work to kind of study parcels that could provide capacity. We haven't made any, there's no decisions on what those might look like. This leaves the smallest amount of housing and population target shortfall out of the 3 options. It requires less growth within the urban growth area. So this is kind of that higher growth, that this would be the most sets of comprehensive plan changes. And we'd have to work with you over the next, 9 months on exactly what those look like and where they are, take a lot of community feedback on them and hear that community voice. So this option, I think, is, if you're going down this way, I think this is the easiest one to go to the county and say, there's a lot of growth we're taking, we can't take it all. How are we going to work on this together? Because this would, you're looking at bulk standard code changes, some zoning changes. The other thing too is we're trying to, if we're going to make any zoning changes in the city as part of the update, it has to be something that makes sense too. Like it has to be something that works economically, that would actually redevelop. It has to be something that aligns with the other goals of the city. So we have to mix all of those things together. But this option gets you the most realized capacity within the city. And we've highlighted the maps in here. We won't go into detail, but under option 3, there's some areas where we look like there could be some opportunities to increase some housing options and pick up some capacity. So if this was the option eventually that we head towards, then we'd have to go through and refine all of this and really drill it down to, the capacity that we'd pick up. So that's where we're at. Happy to take any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you. And I was listening the whole way in.
Great.
And I'm not going to dive too deep because, quite frankly, I'm hoping you're going to listen to the Planning Commission meeting from last night. It's important to listen to their comments. And I had a whole slew of comments last night, so I'm not going to make CAC sit through all those. But you guys are here to hear from us, right? And you get to hear from the horse's mouth, I guess, right now, right? So you're looking for input on these 3 options. And like I said last night, I think we've got a very optimistic set of numbers actually here, right? And I know we've tried to be pessimistic about it, right? But they're very optimistic in my mind. And I also realize we're having to come up with numbers that us and the county can agree on. That's been the stopping point for the last 2 times we've attended these discussions, right? And so I realize we've got to put forth numbers that, can certainly look as though they're very conservative, from the county standpoint of, the amount of buildable land, meaning that there's probably a little bit of an overabundance even here, right? I think the scenario is much worse. For example, the redevelopment, 50% redevelopment figure from the county-wide planning policy for commercial, probably not too practical. I mean, it's the most expensive way to redevelop commercial, to buy an existing entity, tear it down, go through all the environmentals to tear it down just to get to bare land to be able to build it back up. And so I also see that in the C4, C5, some of that vacant land you guys have listed as available is actually out in the accident potential zone, which we have limits. You've got some notes there, I think, of 14 or 17, employees per acre that could generate. We can't even have that many people on that property per the current zoning. So I think the largest hunk of C5, for example, of that 10 acres is actually out in that APZ, and a considerable amount of that C4. So I'm concerned, and have been from the beginning, the housing thing is a math problem, right? There's so much land, and there's so much density that could be taken and still have a quality of life, and then here's the land we need additional. One of the things, we haven't really snuck on, instead of talking maybe about expansion of the UGA, is reconfiguration of the UGA. Right now we have a considerable amount of land in that UGA that going to be hard to redevelop. And at such time as it comes time to redevelop, you know, we're going to need it to probably come in as large. Hillcrest is, for example, what I'm talking about, right? A large housing development has its own infrastructure, water systems, et cetera. That's in our UGA, and that's being counted towards the UGA acreage that we have available, which really isn't available. So when it comes to Plan 1, 2, or 3, 1 obviously is a no start, right? Because like you said, I think that's a hard sell to the county to get past this number thing that we keep running up against. 2, obviously, we've been making moves that direction. We haven't seen a lot to fruition. We might have the first big major project because of our going to 4 stories in our CBD, and we're seeing cities like Anacortes get good redevelopment of space with, going vertical. But that's a slow process too, right? We've been kind of at this for 2 or 3 years, enhancing ADUs, reducing lot sizes, and et cetera, and it just really hasn't taken off, although certainly you could argue 941 units in the pipeline says that something's changing, right? But number 3, here's where the rub with number 3, and you're asking for input, so I'm just going to give it. You're saying basically if we go with this route, we add about 500 additional units in that below 80% AMI, right? Which is where we're hurting, right? And that's the whole idea behind number 3, right? To dig deeper into that lower AMI. But then I look at like the properties that we've got here, and I don't know that however dense you created, I don't know if we took the Oak Harbor Motors property right next to the city park on the waterfront, I don't know that no matter how dense you make that's going to be affordable housing unless it becomes subsidized. I mean, market rate is going to cry for that to not be below 80% AMI housing, right? And so the concern I have is, number 1, some of the selection, and number 2, if we limit the amount of these areas that we're looking at increasing density in, or giving density bonuses, or applying the multifamily tax exemption credit, there's a lot of different ways we can enhance these areas. If we limit the number of them, then we're artificially going to inflate the price of each and every one of these properties, right? Which then goes back against the affordable housing initiative, right? As the property goes up in value, and each of these properties are already partially developed. So now you take a piece of property, you enhance its value because there's a limited number of them available that you can shoehorn into. You buy it with existing infrastructure, you have to tear existing infrastructure out, and now you have to build on it. And I get the methodology behind it about, getting the numbers in there, but the end result, right? Do we end up with below 80% AMI housing after going through that process? So the only way I see around that is to have more of those areas available, right? So they don't become so intense as far as, oh, gee, this is, one of only 6 areas in the city that,
Sure.
We can put this density. And the other concern I just voiced was, obviously form-based code as we continue to pursue that and get there, and I realize that that's a long road yet too, right? We have to come up with design standards and get grand design standards. It seems as though, talking about enhancing density in zones is we're going back to zoning, right? Which, is kind of what we'd like to get away from with form-based code to an extent, right? I don't care if you can fit 60 units on a piece of property as long as you can make it look like it belongs in that neighborhood. And so, I'm just a little concerned that you hear we're creating zones at the same time we're having conversations about how, gee, we sure like to get away from zones, and then we're creating these zones and we're creating a limited amount of them, and in some areas that I don't know is going to result in what we're trying to achieve.
So I guess part of it is, there is, if you've said, hey, most housing below 80% AMI would be multifamily housing, and there's only certain things that can get it built at certain income brackets, I don't think that's necessarily all the city's responsibility. I mean, I think you have to provide the capacity for the housing types that would fit in those buckets. But like 0 to 30% AMI isn't going to get built unless it's really subsidized. At 80% or 70% or 60% AMI, you could encourage it by providing density bonuses, or you could use the MFTE, or you could use other things to do what you can. You can't always, unless you use inclusionary zoning, you can't guarantee it would get built. So I think you just have to put the tools in the tool belt to provide that capacity. But if I'm hearing you right, maybe you're saying option 3, but maybe look more broadly, and then maybe the council would come back in and go like, okay, this option makes some sense.
Yeah, that's my thought. Again, I think, the numbers, I can acquiesce to them, right? But again, this is just another reason why they're a little bit optimistic, right?
Yeah.
We're optimistically putting numbers in, saying we're going to create 500 additional units by this. And that's a pretty, again, I get we're filling the bucket, right? But that's a pretty optimistic deal.
Yeah,
right?
and I guess there's these two diametrically kind of opposed pieces. The growth management is just saying we need to get the capacity. So, I mean, theoretically, you could just zone one parcel for 80-story building and just say there's all of the capacity we need to create. However, that's problematic because you want to create capacity that actually may redevelop during that planning period. Because what's going to happen at the next update is if this type of housing doesn't get built, then it's going to show that you're further behind in housing affordability, and then they'll just keep growing the numbers. So we're trying to make sure we're providing something that gets you as far as you can that you need to go, but also something that seems realistic that it could actually occur too.
Well, and that's exactly where we're at, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's a difference between what we put on paper and what's practical,
Yes.
right? And the closer we can get that gap, the better we are, but there's always going to be a gap, right? There always is. And so just in closing, again, I am concerned about the commercial space and how we're going to provide jobs and services. It's the lifeblood of the community, right? And living in a town where you got to, 2 grocery stores and you got to wait in line for 2 hours to check out wouldn't be a good thing either,
Yeah.
right? And so, in looking, where we're going to provide that commercial capacity, because again, I think that 50% redevelopment figure is a tough one. I can certainly agree that looking at our design and development codes through that process, and last night I, talked about an example on Woodby Avenue. We had 2 single-family residences that were tore down to build a dentist office and build a great little dentist office, redevelop that property in our central development area just like we would like to, and also along with it, redeveloped a huge, gigantic parking lot, right, because of our parking requirements. I mean, the parking lot's, 4 times the size of the building. Right, well, that's just not smart redevelopment, right? And fortunately for them, they were able to find 2 properties together in an area that all worked for them. But, again, that's hard, right? When you're starting to have to buy multiple lots,
Yes.
multiple properties, tear them down, redevelop it to build a parking lot. So I certainly agree that the design and development codes, looking at those, is going to assist us to get closer to that 50% redevelopment. But that is a huge challenging number for our commercial space, and commercial is the lifeblood of any city.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep. Thank you for your feedback.
thank you.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
This guy knows where every piece of dirt on the whole island is.
That's a good thing.
Pretty amazing. Reach out if you guys need to. So with the 0 to 30, I mean, we're certainly looking at a lot of tax credits and, multifamily tax exemptions that we still have to keep moving ahead on as a city. From a practicality point of view, and I was just wondering if this plays into the math as well, and maybe it doesn't because you said we just have to create the available space, I guess. That 0 to 30 is 0 to 30 for the first 15 years, say, and then that tax credit goes away, and then it becomes 80. It seems to be how that goes from a practicality point of view. So I guess, does that play into the math a little of what is 0 to 30, maybe 80 in 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about multifamily tax exemption, that's usually only going to be working for housing that's above like 50 or 60% AMI.
Gotcha.
So the 0 to 30 is going to be government subsidized housing.
Yes.
And clearly, I mean, reports show the amount of the housing that's getting built is lagging substantially behind the amount that's necessary. So I think the city's responsibility then would be to provide the capacity in the zoning and to support that those could be provided, support programs that you can, but you can't create the conditions that would get it built, other than providing the opportunity for it to happen.
Understood, yeah,
Yeah.
because we've seen that with a lot of apartments in town to where they were tax credits. And once that tax credit went away, then the government subsidy went away. So that clears that up a little,
But
I
you're
guess.
correct on when MFT is applied, it would
Yes.
work for this update, but then eventually it's going to run out, and then you're going to be looking for more that would come on
Exactly.
top of it.
So I guess
Yes.
you always got to be building those 0 to 30s, even though they become something else down the road. And, once a lot of this rezoning is done and there are opportunities that maybe don't quite make financial sense from just a developer point of view, hopefully at that point HUD or somebody opens up their finance office like they did in Salem, Oregon or something, and let's make it happen. But it starts with zoning. Well, I guess it starts with hiring you guys in this very review. So thank you.
Well, appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, that's doing all the efforts that you can, but this is a significant challenge. Yeah, yep.
All right, anybody else? Questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Just since you're looking for feedback, I'm just going to kind of echo what Councilmember, actually, I'm not going to echo it. I'm just going to say I support what he had to say. And in option 3, we have to show that we have that we're doing everything we possibly can to reach that number. I do have some concerns with those particular zones or limiting the zones. But I support option 3 so we can show that we are doing everything within our ability to meet that number.
I appreciate the feedback. That's helpful.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you so much.
And all your hard work. We appreciate it. All right, we are going to move on to Parks and Recreation, the Recreation Center feasibility study, and here to talk to us about that will be our Parks Director, Brian Smith.
Oh, they didn't need to hear this, but yeah, we had an employee pick out their list of songs for the month, and then as employees came down the employee hallway, that triggered the music to play as they went to clock in. It's great motivator each day, right? All right. So I'm here to talk to you about the Recreation Center feasibility study. So through the efforts of our residents and city staff, we had a request for the feasibility study, which was sponsored by State Representative Clyde Shavers during the 2024 legislative session for a member-requested local community project request, which provides House and Senate members the ability to request separate appropriations in the capital budget. And they had taken that, put it at $70,000, and Dave Paul went to bat for us and got that up to $200,000. So a big part of the win in that funding goes to Dave Paul's efforts. Governor Inslee signed the 2024 supplemental state capital budget, which includes an appropriation of $200,000 for the feasibility study. The Department of Commerce, which will administer the project, will retain 3% up to a maximum of $50,000 to cover administrative costs. Accordingly, the net grant award will be $194,000, which officially secured funding for the project in fiscal year 2025, which was as of July 1st. This really has been a community-driven project from the very beginning. My very first week here in Oak Harbor, I met Jake Marriott with Evergreen Coast Construction, who came in and immediately said, we need a recreation center in the community. And I heard that over and over as I met with people around the community. Another notable individual from the community is Nolan Saltonstall, who, as part of the Whidbey Royalty program, created their service project around pushing for a recreation center for the community. He came to the Parks and Recreation Commission, presented that, started asking questions like crazy. How do we get this process going? Who do we need to talk to? What do we need to do? They went out and got petitions. They went and did a fundraising effort at Mod Pizza. Nolan applied for and is currently the youth rep on the Parks and Recreation Commission. He goes to school on September 25th, so he'll be leaving that. But I promise him we'll keep him involved and in the loop on the project. And when the day comes that we have that ribbon cutting, hopefully he'll be up there with a pair of scissors. You've seen him quite a bit at council meetings. And what a great example of youth understanding and going through the process of local government, right? We also heard from the Boys and Girls Club, met with them and their regional director. That's where I first got in touch with state representatives. Clive Shavers was there and met with us as well. They were talking about their sports court project and wanting desire to have an indoor facility for the community and what that looks like. And Clyde was the one that suggested that's something that the state would be very interested in supporting and something that the city should lead out on. So that kind of triggered that along with the would-be royalty encouragement. In our discussions with the North Whidbey Pool Parks and Recreation District, they've long-standing been looking at what's the next generation for that facility as it nears at the end of its life, planning around a recreation center and for those kind of activities. It's also been talked about in our council priorities, and just a big community push to look at how we can make this happen for the community. So let's talk a little bit about what does that look like. We now have the funding to do a feasibility study. I worked with the Parks and Recreation Commission, Ballard King, VCBO, and Sandra Place, our Central Services Supervisor, assisted as well with putting together a scope for the feasibility study. And I'll go over each one of those points that would be included in a potential scope, and I'm just looking for your feedback as a council on what you'd like to see included in that, if you feel anything's left out. And I'll give you some cost considerations at the end there. So first of all, obviously there will be a project overview, right? So this will identify those constraints, parameters. They'll meet the vendor will meet with our project team and just get a layout for what it is that we're looking at and go over the scope, and we'll refine that with them in the contract negotiations. So that scope will include a market analysis. So that'll look at things like our service area, identifying that, demographic characteristics of the community and that profile, for everything from like population, age range, income, businesses, schools, trends. It'll look at review of existing agency facilities, programs and services. So they'll look at our master plans, existing studies that we might have around it, organizational structure, wage scales, department policies and procedures, what existing aquatic or recreation program statistics exist in the community, demand for programs and services and facilities. They'll look at a competitive market analysis, which will have alternative recreation and aquatic service providers, facilities and services offered around the community, admission rates, attendance numbers. They'll also include comparison with national, regional, and local participation statistic trends for NSGA and NEA standards, potential participation levels, and finally a market segment determination and analysis, which will have a determination of user groups, impact of user group needs on facility components that we would want to include in there. Yes, sir.
Just before we move on, because it seems a little easier, with the market analysis there, when you get into the existing facilities, does what the Navy has count in those existing facilities? And the reason I ask, not everybody can use them, but I guess because they exist, not everybody that uses the Navy facility would then use the cities, I guess.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just wondering how that all shakes out on the market analysis.
Yeah, because we'll look at both regional and in the area, in that service area, and the Navy is a big part of that. And you're right, there are some constraints both with access from
Yeah.
non-naval families, as well as those who, might prefer to use that versus as included already in their
Exactly.
benefits, right?
I was hoping it didn't look like, hey, they already have a rec center. Well, they do for some people, but a lot of us can't use it, so.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Citizen participation plan. So this is usually where a lot of the costs come in studies like this. The plan will review any existing research, have a random statistically valid survey of potential users. We're going to look for about 300 responses, determine the desired data needs with that, identify sample parameters and audience. We'll develop a phone mail survey instrument and questions around that. Evaluate and interpret survey results. We'll do some benchmarking with results from similar communities. Online survey of potential users. Determine desired data needs and the audience around that. Develop an online survey instrument and questions. Evaluate and interpret those survey results. And conduct, I think we'll look at 2 community meetings and determine community satisfaction with current recreation facilities. Identify priorities for future recreation services facilities, access or assess the willingness to pay for fee levels, and conduct stakeholder interviews. Look at about 10 max for those. Identify key community leaders and project influence individuals. We'll conduct interviews to gain responses from those groups. Look about 8 focus group sessions max. And then look at conducting interviews to gain responses from those groups to compile that and interpret all that information received into that report. So we really want a good comprehensive participation plan. There is a lot of interest around the community for a recreation center, and so I'm pretty confident that we'll get really good participation, but this is going to be one of the key functions in the plan that will help inform council on community's desire and needs. Programming, we'll look at project component recommendations and prioritization, validate or adjust any existing facility programs, determine sizing and space allocation requirements for the facility, component relationships and interaction with the design and layout, development of program statement consensus, operating structure and parameters. So really it's a philosophy of operation and priorities of use. The site analysis will identify all possible sites and analyze each site for development requirements, acquisition issues, constructability, visibility, access, community presence, impact, and then provide a recommended site preference. The conceptual layout and design will include a site plan, a spatial relationship of components, phasing plan, and conceptual plans. We'll include an operations analysis, which will look at attendance estimates for daily, annual, and by facility or component. Fee structure, which will look at drop-ins, multiple admissions or annual passes, family, corporate, group memberships, rentals. Sources of income, which will have an identification and verification of revenue sources. Operating cost projections. So we'll develop a line item budget, personnel by position, contractual services, commodities, capital replacement costs, and then revenue generation projections. So develop a line item, accounting, look at admissions, annual multiple admissions, programs and services, rentals, other revenue sources. We'll also have in there revenue expenditure comparisons. So we'll develop a cost recovery level for that. Project recommendations and profitability of components, which is really our marketing strategy and program service considerations. An economic income projections looks at direct impact from operations and indirect impact from events and other activities. our project capital cost estimate. So this is site limitations and opportunities, site prep, infrastructure costs, building construction costs, equipment costs, soft cost estimates, and total project cost estimate. We'll look at partnerships. So that's identification of potential partners with school districts, businesses, healthcare organizations, even adjoining cities, and others like the North Whidbey Pool Parks and Recreation District, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and other organizations like that. And then a determination of realistic partnership opportunities. So cost-benefit analysis of each of those and what's in the best interest of the city. One of the things that we had, I think, was a takeaway from the Centralia site visit that we did with the commission and some members of council was sort of a cautionary tale of careful with your partnerships and how you structure that, especially with private organizations, to make sure that the project continues to be a public benefit. So project funding analysis, we'll look at identifying possible funding sources, whether that's through a general obligation bond, a tax increase, fundraising, donations, grants, partnerships, and determination of possible funding scenarios for both capital and operations. And then a final report that will be given to council. There will be a written final report, conceptual drawings, a presentation of that report, and discussion points on a series of meetings to be determined by council until you feel satisfied with what is there. So the timeline, the anticipated schedule for that could be anywhere from 4 months to 2 years, depending on the scope, depending on how we want to roll that in. I always strive to immediately roll plans into implementation and action items and have that built into the budget. I don't like to have a plan that we look at and then plan for using that plan in the future, but like to make that plan an implementation plan. So in the feasibility studies that I've done in the past, typically that has grown the amount of time in doing that as it rolls over into assistance with bids and fundraising and general bond studies. But we've always been very happy with the outcome of that based off of the feasibility study recommendations. The committee we'd like to put together for that, our recommendation would be to have some select members from Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, a liaison or two from City Council, a few residents that live in Oak Harbor that are interested in participating, and then Parks and Recreation staff as needed. Ideally, that would be about 12 people. That's what I've worked with in the past and seems to work very well. That would work on the final draft of the RFP to go out and then review those proposals and work with the consultants in putting the study together. So costs. When we first started talking about this last year, I gave administration a cost estimate of about $30,000 to $80,000, depending on how involved we wanted the study to be. A lot of that cost that we have here is, like I mentioned before, citizen participation. This breakdown is a range, and it's on the conservative or high-end level estimates. That includes all tasks from each of the 12 areas of consideration. When we look at citizen participation, which, like I said, is the largest one, it's about $12,000 to $15,000 for the surveys, for the written and phone surveys, $5,000 or so for the online survey, community meetings at about $1,500 to $2,000 each will be about $3,000 to $4,000, and then stakeholder interviews are fairly inexpensive. We'll do about 10 at about $250 per interview. Focus group sessions also run about $250 or so at 8 of those. And then on top of these costs will be any direct reimbursable reimbursables, plus probably about 10% for contingency. So total project estimate, I would say is about 98 to 134 if we include everything on the probably conservative end. So we do have quite a bit of buffer there with the funding that's been given by the state. There's some recommendations for council for the use of the excess funds. We can put those towards conceptual plans, renderings, development of bid documents, and implementation cost engineering, and design for construction, investigation of bonding and other funding sources for build-out, and keep that momentum going into implementation. All right, so that covers the scope of what we're looking for the feasibility study. I know that's a lot there. You have that in your packet, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Stuckey.
The impression I'm getting is it goes over a few things.
Yeah, we want it to be thorough and really give you everything that you need to make a well-informed, confident decision on this is what we want, and this is how we're going to pay for it, and this is how we're going to go forward. And so there's no fear or uncertainty.
Yeah, much appreciated. 2 questions, and if you covered it, you covered a lot. I apologize, I'm having you repeat yourself. Up to 2 years is a decent amount of time. You know, I don't want folks to think this has been forgotten. We'll receive periodic updates as we go along. It's not like we just get an update once the feasibility study is completed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of why I recommend having a member of council on.
Sure.
So during council comments, they can give an update on where we are with it. I would anticipate and expect the study probably go 6 months to a year. But I would put out as far as 2 years, depending on how we want to continue that into implementation.
Sure. I feel like right now we have momentum for this, and I don't want it to be so long for updates where we start to lose some of that momentum.
Right, yeah.
And this may be getting a little into the specifics. You had mentioned on the community participation, basically asking the community what level of cost they're willing to absorb.
Mm-hmm.
How detailed is that going to be? I mean, is that going to be going over, is this going to be a sales tax? Is this going to be property? Like, is it going into different options? Are you expecting that level of detail in that?
Yes, yeah, it'll be very detailed. We'll talk about all the different kind of funding source options, whether that's tax increase, looking at anything from bonding through sales, property, whatever that might look like, tax versus fee-based, and really get the community's input on, you know what, I feel like this should just be for the users, or yes, this is a public benefit and should be supported by the public. Yeah.
Sure, and of course, I'm sure it goes without saying, we're going to be looking too about where these folks live. I mean, obviously, a sales tax certainly would affect people that are in the county that use our services, but folks that are going to a property tax route,
Right.
it wouldn't be so much. So, okay.
That's why we want to get detailed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the thoroughness and look forward to updates as they go along. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, just real quick, on the committee there with the 2 council members, if staff, Councilmember Marshall, if the mayor felt that there was a need for a council member that understands how to build these facilities and operate them and has been on the backside of many of them, whether it be, Linwood or Seattle U or Leavenworth. I mean, I've been on the backside of a lot of them all over the state. So I would, if there is a position, I would be more than willing to jump in. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Councilmember Marshall, anyone else?
You're setting him up.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. No, I'm just super excited about this, Brian, and I appreciate all that you put into this, and can't wait to get this ball rolling. So, thank you.
All right, so I guess that's everybody. So we'll continue on with Parks and Recreation, Flagstaff rededication at Veterans Memorial Park, and here to talk about that is Brian Smith and our former City Council member, Ms. Beth Munns.
Hi, Beth. You want?
Go on first?
I don't know. We're going to tag team this. We'll do this
Okay.
together.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So maybe I'll go ahead and start us off. So City Council approved the installation of the Angel of Creativity art piece at Flintstone Park last February. That installation, the groundbreaking, is tomorrow. You're all invited for a little photo op as we get ready to put in the pilings there. The installation does require reconfiguration of the park, as the statue will be placed right in the roundabout driveway there. We had a committee of Parks and Recreation Commission members, Art Commission members, City Council. We had citizens from the community out there with us as well, discussing the placement of the statue and reconfiguration needs and how to best do that. A lot of discussion around the Naval Flagstaff gift that was given to the city also happened, and there was a lot of ideas for, well, how do we do that? The reconfiguration, we can get into that, I guess, at the end of the presentation. We can talk a little more about that, but the suggestion right now is to remove the drive from the entrance to the condos all the way around, and we'll saw that all in. With that, we want to look at how do we keep the importance of the Flagstaff as a central piece. And so one of the suggestions that was given was to rededicate that and relocate it to Veterans Memorial Park. This is a site map of Flintstone Park. And you can see there where the sculpture will be located, requiring us to remove that roundabout drive. The reason we're going to remove the entire thing instead of just cutting it off at the Flagstaff is a strong recommendation from Development Services with our first site plan, which was to end at the lower parking lot and then remove the rest of that roundabout. They did not want to have cars back up and go towards the condos back out. We could widen that road to do that, but there is a lot of concern around headlights into windows. And I think there was quite a bit of discussion about that when those were put in, which is why the roundabout exists. So instead, what we would like to do is remove the entirety of the roundabout and then expand the upper parking down to give us additional parking spaces for those that would be lost lower wise. We would keep a pathway down connecting to the trail, and the trail is unaffected by this. But we want to talk with you a little bit about the flagpole, the flagstaff that we have from the Navy. You want to take it from here, Beth?
Sure, tag team. All right, so this flagstaff commemorates the relationship between the Navy and the citizens. And as elected officials, you've got you've got the job now to keep that relationship going. And this is part of history. And this is a very important time in Oak Harbor history. And some of you probably weren't even born, or you were in grade school or whatever. And if you hadn't lived here for a long time, you don't know. So I just want to read what is on the plaque. The plaque is, this Navy flagstaff is placed here to honor all those Navy people who have served aboard the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island, their families, and the people of Oak Harbor who have long supported the Navy mission. Our national ensign was flown from this flagstaff aboard the Naval Air Station for more than 45 years and was erected here through joint efforts of the city and the Navy. It is dedicated this Armed Forces Day, 18th of May, 1991. So it used to be, a little history, that Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, they all had their day. And government decided, no, you need to have one day. So in 1949, they made the one day. And this was when America could honor all the men and women serving currently in the armed forces. Now, we don't have a national holiday for it anymore, but they used to do things like that. So this was important. It was a group of citizens. They don't list. They just say dignitaries and citizens from the community put this together. There's no on who paid for what. The Navy offered the flagstaff, and so it's there. And it was put in with a lot of cement and stuff. So anyway, but around this time, Desert Storm was happening. And if you probably weren't old enough to recognize, this town was a ghost town because everybody was gone. I remember it vividly because my husband was on an aircraft carrier in the middle of this. And so that was going on at this time. And then also in the fall of 90 and 91, the word BRAC came out. And I doubt any of you would know what BRAC meant. BRAC is the Base Realignment and Closure Commission. And they came up with a list of 82 military installations they were going to close. They didn't want DOD, they didn't want the military to say anything, they were just going to evaluate. And NAS Woodby was on it. And so citizens of this town got together and used their own money. And we also had some elected officials go to San Francisco and testify when they had trials there. We also had Barry Saline spent 6 weeks in Washington, D.C. tracking all of this. You couldn't have sold a house, a business, not anything. It was dead in this town. So you've got all the combinations of these things, but this was done before the word was BRAC. But anyway, they came out with, they wanted to close 82 potential things, and on June 30th, the vote was 7-0 to remove NAS Woodby Island. Woodby News-Times ran a red paper express saying on Sunday that we were off the list, which helped tremendously the economic development of the town. On July 1st, it was finalized, and Woodby was off. So it is important, I think, and you are stewards, to keep this relationship going and not just toss everything away. The plaque has meaning. It wasn't supposed to say, oh, well, the mayor so-and-so and council so-and-so and this citizen and that citizen. It is the people and the Navy did this, and it's before all of this happened. And I think it's important that you keep as much of it as you can. It's kind of like when we redid downtown, you found rings where people used to tie their horses, and the rings are supposed to be there somewhere. I forget where they are exactly. You have to look hard for them, but they took them carefully away and they put them back in the sidewalk. So I am hoping that you will get behind this, and it has been suggested that it be the dedication or rededication on Veterans Day, the 11th of November, but please don't have it at the 11th hour on the 11th day. Navy League and the community put on a Veterans Day ceremony program from 11 to 12. So sometime after that, okay, you can have your dedication. But and because of this, we still have groups like CORE, WISE, and that still want to get rid of our Navy. And one of the things that spurred off in 2003 was the Military Appreciation Picnic to bring this community together. And it is the 14th of September from noon to 4. And I even believe I convinced the Admiral from the region to attend. So anyway, please support this project. And another reason to move the configuration is so you can still get the hydros crane, so they can lower the hydros down into the water, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Wiesner. So there's other reasons why it's the line that it is. I remember that discussion when we were talking with the Parks Department. And that's all that I have.
And I'll add, so with the relocation and rededication of the Flagstaff to Veterans Memorial Park, we would re-honor it with a new dedicatory plaque based off of the original plaque from about 40 years ago. And so that would read Veterans Memorial Flagstaff. Our national ensign was flown from this flagstaff aboard the Naval Air Station for more than 45 years before being displayed at Flintstone Park for 33 years, and is now placed here to honor military veterans and all those who have served aboard the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island, their families, and the people of Oak Harbor who have long supported the Navy mission. Dedicated this Veterans Memorial Day, 11 November 2024. Questions, comments, feedback?
Councilmember Stuckey.
One question you answered, and thank you, Beth, for all that history. As someone who wasn't here or alive, I appreciate that.
I'm not that old yet, but I do know that one.
One of my questions was going to be, are we going to clean up the plaque or get a new one? It sounds like we're going to get a new one, which is awesome. Keep in mind, as someone who deals with bronze plaques all the time, those can sometimes take a couple months. So it's definitely something you don't want to wait a month and then order. It can take 2 to 3 months on those. I'm sensitive to certain optics issues. Is there going to be a pretty well thought out PR plan with Maggie about all of this?
Yeah, we want this to be a community
Sure.
event, right? Yeah, and I think the big motivation around this is to make sure that we continue to honor that gift, rather than council's already made the decision on the angel statue and where it's going to be located. It doesn't require the flagstaff to move. We can leave flagstaff right where it is. I think people are going to come to the park and see those side by side and feel that that's fairly odd and ask why didn't the city move the flagstaff to a little more central location where it serves as a central piece, right? So that's a secondary option, is we can move the flagstaff within the park, maybe towards the front of the park as well. But we felt that this option was the best option for honoring the intent of the gift, and is pretty appropriate, especially to have it at Veterans Memorial Park, since it is a naval flagstaff. As far as if you're talking about optics of removing the flag, we can put we actually have several flags right there in the area. If you stand in the park, you can see 2 of them, besides the one that's in the park itself. But if we do want to have another flag within the park, then we can basically just switch with the existing flag at Veterans Memorial and have that kind of over. I'd imagine we'd place it probably right where the parking would be, the improved parking.
I'm just thinking, a lot of times things just become part of the scenery. You drive by it every day, you don't think about it. But the moment it's not there, somebody brings that up. And so I just want to be careful that we're letting folks know well in advance of what the plan is. And it's not, this is gone.
Right.
It's going to be better and spruced up a little bit. So I'm just making real sure we have our PR on point for all of this.
Maggie will be all over us.
I have no doubt. I just wanted to have it be said. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I sympathize with the same optics that Brian's speaking of there. Flagpole is 78 years old, I believe, roughly. What does moving it look like? Will the entire concrete base and everything be moved? Will a new concrete base be poured? Will the flagpole be shrunk a few feet in height? I guess those are all my questions that I kind of hope there are some answers to.
Yeah, so we actually wanted to refurbish the flagpole. We went to pull it to do a refurbishment, and we couldn't get it out with well, I think it's actually cemented in, even though you can go over it and wiggle it quite easily.
Well, it looked like
but
the concrete was poured, and it looked like they slid it down in there.
yeah, and then I think they built the base around it, so I think it has some ears on the bottom that are cemented in. So we'll have to remove the base to get it out. We have a base already that will accept the width of the existing flagstaff at Veterans Memorial. So we'll take it out. We might modify the bottom to remove those ears. We'll clean it up and refurbish it so it looks nice and new, and then we'll install it in the existing base at Veterans Memorial.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like it'll be necessary to shorten it then?
I don't think so, but if we do, it'd be pretty minimal.
Cool, cool. I mean, for me, the other question is, does this trigger some years-long shoreline exemption permit or anything?
No, we're just replacing flagpole with flagpole.
Cool, 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 cool. Yeah, so for me, as long as we don't pull it out, figure out, oh, this is much worse than we thought it was, and then we're 10 years down the road and we're still trying to deal with it. So for me, I would support it as long as basically it's going from location A to B in in the same day or the same week type time frame.
Well, when we pull it, like I said, we'll have it refurbished. That'll take a few weeks.
Okay, perfect.
Councilmember Arms.
Beth, thank you for the history, and I do remember when they were going to close the base. I'm old enough to remember all that. It was a really scary experience for a lot of people and very, very sensitive. So thank you for taking the time, and it's really important that we do this and we honor this. And as my husband's a veteran, I really appreciate the military, and so thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Councilmember Wigginstein.
Thank you for bringing this up. I do have a couple of questions. Can the old plaque be cleaned up and also put with the new one?
We could do that if that's council's desire, yeah.
Okay. And were there any other locations considered prior to Veterans Memorial Park? My only concern with Veterans Memorial Park is it's only going to be visible to those who go down Regatta or head out towards the seaplane base, which is a lot of our naval residents and people that utilize the base. I was just curious if there were other locations even considered.
No, we had talked about moving it within Flintstone Park, which probably would require a little bit of permitting, but this just seemed like the most appropriate suggestion.
Yeah, it by far isn't a bad one at all. So I just, it's a, piece of our history, piece of the Navy's history here, and a memorial park for our veterans is an adequate place by means. I just was curious as to if we considered any other locations, because we tend to look at Oak Harbor when we're coming in and out of Oak Harbor. There's quite a bit right downtown and along the waterfront, but we don't have tons of things popping at us right as we head off 20 coming in from the bridge, other than the planes, and then we have a windmill, right? And so I was just curious that potentially if any of that, and this may be a whole different commission or department and whatnot to do some work potentially up there, because I could see potentially a flagpole of that stature with history as a stopping spot with the City of Oak Harbor sign and welcome to Whidbey Island and any Whidbey type stuff, right? That could be a photo moment for social media and pushing people to get out here, as we know that some of us realize that the social media marketing is absolutely a must. So that was just my thoughts. Other than that, I love this idea.
Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the idea of moving it. I think that's an appropriate place to put that flagpole there. I'd also be in support of putting a new flag in Flintstone Park. I think anytime we can have a flag in our premier parks is absolutely a good idea. And, so can't have too many flags, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth. It's great to see you.
Welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem has something. I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem.
I didn't have anything to add.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
No mistake.
No worries. All right. Well, thank you very much, Beth, for being here. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
All right, we're moving on to
9 a.m.
Finance, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, Council Priority Projects Update, and here to talk about that is our Grants Administrator, Wendy Horn.
Okay, now can you hear me? Good afternoon. Wendy Horn, Grants Administrator. I know it's been some time since we've talked about the American Rescue Plan. also known now as the Council Priority Project. So we're going to give you a brief update to that today. Brief history, for those of you who were not around in 2021, the city received $6.58 million in American Rescue Plan funds. In July 2021, the City Council created an ARPA subcommittee, and though the committee was created to vet projects and then make recommendations to the whole council for funding projects. So over the next 6 months or so, the council approved 54 different projects and activities that totaled about $6.6 million. And then in fiscal year 2022, the city decided to apply all of our remaining ARPA funding at the time, which was about $5.5 million, towards the general provision of government services, which was one of the eligible categories at the time, with a focus on public safety, so basically fire and police services. And with that, basically what that did was free up that $5.5 million in general fund so that we weren't constrained to any timeframes to spend it, to claim it from the federal government. So it essentially created a savings, and we basically retitled those projects, which are still on the books, as council priority projects. So this is the full list of all of the projects that the council approved during that time, and as you can see, it's lengthy and a wide variety. And generally speaking, again, you approved about $6.6 million in projects and initiatives. To date, we've spent approximately $3.55 million. There's about $2.75 million remaining to spend. And again, if we spend everything that's on the books right now, it will be about $6.3 million. And that is primarily due, it's lower than the 6.6 because last month, I believe, one of the last meetings, the council approved not going forward with one of the projects. It was $300,000. So we'll get to that in a minute. So these are the projects that have been completed. There's been 33 of them, and as you can kind of see, generally speaking, they're mostly one-time purchases, a lot of equipment, technology, those kinds of things. Just a little bit, few pictures. Mayor trying out some of the technology in one of those pictures. But bunker gear, police gear, technology, security cameras, etc. That was just, just a visual for you. And then in terms of the ones that are still left, the personal protective equipment, all those final purchases have been identified. Both the term economic development coordinator and the grants administrator position are both paid through this December 2024. The citywide ERP is set to begin implementation in 2025, January. The replacement servers, which I think there were two, are either going to be purchased at the end of this year or into 2025. The Windjammer Park project, basically that project is for shoreline restoration, and it's basically Parks and Recreation is monitoring the situation. As you know, there's been erosion down there, so they're monitoring that situation and using that funding as needed. Flintstone Park, as Brian was just mentioning, the parking lot redesign with removing the flagpole, installing the statue, part of the funding is going to come from the ARPA, or the council priority projects, about $15,000 to redesign that parking lot. The Hal Ramilly Park project has not started. And then the reuse effluent water for irrigation at Windjammer Park is the project that the council approved discontinuing. So that was about $300,000. The police department is currently getting quotes for their P25 radio upgrades. And their, the vests, the SWAT vests, they are replacing those as they need to. In terms of Serendipity Lane, I believe that project is almost done. It's been a long time coming, but it is almost done. Both the center generator and the city hall generator are both on order. It's taking a little longer to get those than expected. The sewer slip line project has actually been combined into the inflow and infiltration correction project, the $1.95 million that we received from the federal government. So the $325,000 that you approved to replace those slip lines is being incorporated into that project. And they're working on an RFP to put out in the fall for design of that project. So we'll be in construction ideally in 2025. The administration is currently in discussions with the Navy on the sewer lagoon decommissioning project. The Northeast Regatta water pipeline replacement is literally underway, as you all are aware, that Regatta is closed. And then the broader water main replacement projects. West Whidbey was completed in 2023. Northeast 7th is using some of that funding this year. Lopez Drive will be replaced in 2025, and Glencoe will be done in 2026. And then last but not least, the center has some dollars committed to pay for fitness and training certifications for their instructors. And again, here's some more photos of some of the activities and projects that have been taking place over the last couple of years. And then last but not least, while this doesn't necessarily pertain to the council priority projects, we wanted to give you just an idea of how we're addressing the cost of administering grant funding projects going forward. So, as I think I've mentioned before in past presentations, most federal and some state granting agencies expect that they'll cover a portion or a percentage of indirect costs, or as we say, like the soft costs of administering a grant. Currently, generally speaking, the maximum rate for that indirect is 10%. That is actually increasing to 15% in the federal world over the next couple of months due to a new Treasury rule. So these indirect costs, they include things like costs associated with executing grant agreements, reports, financial management, progress and financial compliance, reimbursement requests, all the things that take time on the part of staff but are not directly paid for by the grant itself. So what does that mean to Oak Harbor? Basically, I just want to let you know that in the coming years, as we continue to apply for grants, it's our hope that each and every grant as we apply for, we will be able to recoup some of those indirect costs in order to offset some of those expenses that are just behind the scenes that we have to pay for. And with that, that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm sorry, do I accidentally have my hand up or something? Because I don't mean to.
Yes, you do. Sorry.
Oh, please take it down. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
no
sorry.
worries. That's okay. Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thanks for that, Wendy, and thanks for that, I think, $7 million worth of grants, right? Because your position was created out of this ARPA program, and is one of the people being on the committee, I can think back, it was kind of a bit of a windfall for the city, but it wasn't, right? Because we'd gone through some pretty tough times and didn't know where the future was going to bring. And one of the things we wanted to try and accomplish with the money was, because at first, when the money first came to us, it was restricted money, right? We had to use it for very specific things. We just couldn't dump it in the general fund. So together with staff, David and the rest of the staff, we sat down and we looked at what things we were going to kind of have to do anyhow, so that we were able to use this money for that. And I think as a result of that and a result of David's great investment strategy over the last few years, along with a pretty decent economy, our unencumbered reserves have grown by about $4.5 million, right? And which, again, I think this contributed to that, right? Because we were able to take money, put it back into the general fund, money that we had budgeted, we were going to expend anyhow, now we're sitting healthy, and again, testament to using some of that money to create your position, right? And the $7 million worth of grants that you've administered since that position's been created. So, again, thanks for the report. I'm glad to see, David, that we're tracking all this separate still, and Wendy, just so that we, can get a grasp on it. Obviously, it was things that we don't want to slip away, because a lot of them were projects, again, that we've been intending to do and just didn't know how we were going to fund it. And then when this funding came along, we were able to do. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Echoing a lot of what Councilmember Wiesner said there, I really appreciate the transparency of staff of walking through, how those went from ARPA projects to council priority projects. I remember when there was a dust up in DC, and I think they were duking it out over a continuing resolution, and there was a Heritage PAC, I think, that might have had like 40 congressmen that wanted to come and retract any money that hadn't been spent yet. And, Congressman Larson's office was decent enough to reach out and say, hey, you might have problems. So I really, truly appreciate staff being on top of this, how they were, and, switching those projects to council priority projects and continuing to track those. And even though they changed in name, they are all still happening. So pretty cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the Police Department Annual Report, and here to introduce is Police Chief Tony Slowick.
Trouble.
Thankfully, I have an amazing
Council, is that what's on the list? Council badges and see, and then they get me by putting a chair up here with arms on it and a little wide. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Chief Slowick for the Police Department. I have presented a few items over this last year, or since taking over in December as the police chief, regarding police staffing and a few things like that. So some of that will be very similar. Additionally, I've handed out our annual report, which is also on our city website. So our mission at the police department is dedicated to community safety and service. That is something that has been our mission as long as I've been at the police department, and we this year we just are going through a strategic plan update for the next 5 years, and that's what we looked at is our mission statement and our values. So we're refining some of those things, and we're excited to what that's going to look like in the future. Go back real quick. Our values are respect, integrity, professionalism, accountability, and collaboration. Over this last year, we specifically since October, we've had a big turnover in staffing, and since October, we've had 9 positions that have rotated in our police officer commission side. Some of that is through retirements, and Chief Dresker retired with 34 years of law enforcement service, and Captain Bailey with 28 years. This year, we said goodbye to Officer Lullum with 25 years and Officer Esparza with 20 years, and next week, we'll have another officer retiring, Officer Sewell, who's only been with us for 2.5 years, but he's got over 25 years in law enforcement of corrections and police side. And so it's going to be pretty impactful for us having that experience going out the door. Thankfully, we, working with HR, we are finding qualified applicants and getting them through our process and our pipeline. So some other recognitions with years of service and over this last year. So like I said, we've hired some new people. So these are all our new hires since January. And I still have one other position that is vacant. And we have that person in our pipeline right now. And we expect to be onboarding her in the next 6 weeks or so. So as we talk about the police department, our core fundamentals, really, it's our calls for service and our proactive police work are our critical areas that we look at. In February, I did a staffing study with you and went over where we are at. When we were staffed last year, at one point we had all our 29 commissioned officers staffed. However, with the extended calls for service, the mental health responses that we're doing, the extra connecting people with care, our proactive time is down to a little over 20% of our time, and we want to see that about 40%. And when we talk about proactive time, that then goes to that 5 fundamental focused areas of schools, parks, downtown, traffic, and community. And that's where we do our bike patrol, we're walking downtown, we're engaging with the businesses. I was just at a business meeting for Main Street this morning, doing a presentation, and we had that conversation about they haven't seen us out and about, and it's currently I have 10 officers that either are 3 are in the field training, so they're riding with a seasoned officer and they're going through training to become they've completed the police academy, but they're going through our 3-month field training program. 3 are at our police academy. 1 position's not filled. 1 person's retiring tomorrow, and I've got 2 people out on family leave. So that's 10 people that really we would be down, and it takes us down to like 19 right now. So we're running pretty lean, and but we're meeting the needs of the community. So doing the extra stuff has been a little challenging for us. So as we look at some accomplishments for last year, some of our big things are we did a professional development training for 8 of our officers. This is something that we're going to continue, and looking at next year, 2025, we're actually going to do a professional development training for our sergeants. Working with Captain Barton on that, and I'm excited for what that looks like. I think that we have opportunities with the changes that we've had in staffing and bringing in Captain Barton that we can work on, and honestly partnering with Chief Anderson in the fire department and looking at how can we improve our interoperability with other agencies, how do we improve our leadership program, how do we improve our professional development, and that's all part of our strategic plan and our succession planning. Additionally, we did a police staffing analysis, which I presented in February. We restarted our community advisory board, which I think is going really well, and I'm excited for the board members we have and for the 2 open vacancies that we have, that we'll have those filled soon. We have a public safety survey that is currently out to the public, and it closes at the end of September. And then the biggest step for us is our WASPIC accreditation, and really it's a 4-year reaccreditation. WASPIC, or the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, is a nationally recognized accreditation body by the Department of Justice, so this is a big accomplishment for them. However, for us, internally, it's a big milestone to make sure that we're following best practices, that we are our policies and procedures are updated, that we are following the state law and the law changes that have happened. We're providing adequate training for our staff, and that we have those interlocal and MOUs in place that make sure that we can meet the needs of the community. So with that, we have completed, as you see there, I don't need to read it out loud, but our final step is actually tomorrow at 1 o'clock is our final walkthrough. That piece, once is done, will be our final step, and in November, we will receive our reaccreditation, which I'm really proud of our department, and it's a big success for us. Currently, less than 1/3 of all law enforcement agencies in Washington State are even accredited, and then less than 70% of agencies that accredit the first time can reaccredit because they have a hiccup in the 4-year process that's being evaluated. So it's a big lift. I'll just go back really quick in accomplishments, and I know Wendy was up here. I think a couple things I forgot to put on the slide are Again, we're in a 5-year strategic plan that we're working with our staff with and also our CAB board. Last year, we did create a regional SWAT team, and we have that interlocal in place. That regional SWAT team was initially between the Oak Harbor Police Department and the Skagit County Sheriff's Office. Since then, we've had Island County Sheriff's Office, Burlington Police Department, Anacortes Police Department, and Cedar-Woolley Police Department all sign on to that agreement and provide staffing or funding for that team, which is a big accomplishment. We've really reestablished our partnership with the Drug Task Force. We had Commander Tobin Meyer that came and presented to everybody, and we're looking forward to that partnership as well. And then with Wendy, who was just here, I'll be honest, we have applied for almost over $800,000 in grant funding for the police department just this year. And so far, we've received $80,000. I know of a grant that we were notified yesterday that's, we had to change one thing on our questionnaire, and we should be receiving that confirmation, which will take us up to 120. And then I believe that we're going to receive the grant funding for the COPS grant for staffing, and that would take us up to $745,000. So she does a tremendous job, and I will tell you that I couldn't do any of this, and we wouldn't have probably applied for any of those grants without her. So I appreciate everything that she does. So as we talked about earlier this year, when we talked about staffing and our staffing model, our calls for service were down over last year or the previous year. However, our call times and the amount of times on calls is getting longer. That's due to the officers requiring going to 2 or 3 officers to a call, or the types of call which require us to stay on scene more for getting connected to care with mental health services, driving people to the hospital, or for us, our closest mental health secure beds are St. Joseph's Hospital or Providence Medical Center. So those are challenges that we are continually facing. So our metrics, which we saw in February for arrests and traffic stops and criminal traffic. And then as we discussed previously as well as, we are continuing to get public disclosure requests. I know the city's having the same thing, but as the police department, we fulfill our own public disclosure requests. And those, we had a 109% increase over a 2-year period, and that's continuing to go up. And we're projecting to be over that number for this year as well. One thing that was asked, and I can't remember if it was at a CAB meeting or a city council workshop, was our human services and how all of that going. I think actually it was probably during one of our opioid settlement fund conversations. So this is, I pulled some information, and this is only the referrals that we do for mental health or services that are submitted through an official referral portal that we have. So, and really, when I say that, that means it's an email on a form, but we were able to track those. So in 2023, we had, it was about 180 referrals. We're over 250 for the year when we look June to July, or July to July was 250. So, and these are different mental health or opioid drug addiction services, could be housing as well. A lot of those things are blended, and it's really hard to decipher one specific thing. Again, we did talk about back in February that we had historical staffing numbers. Again, we're trying to get up to 34 for staffing. We're currently at 29, but right now, with the people that are on different phases of staffing, I only have 19 people that are on independent assignment that can work the road. So. Additionally, we changed our minimum staffing in 2024 to 3 officers, and that's between 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or to 3 a.m. So currently, this is our staffing that we have now. Again, the positions in yellow are unfilled. So I have one captain position unfilled and an evidence position that's unfilled. I am filling that captain position with just a commissioned officer at this time. I'm not going out looking for a second captain. I really want to promote internally. I think that's healthy for our organization. However, there is some instruction and training and leadership and professional development that we need to do to make sure we have viable and quality candidates for that. Those other people that you see in green are in training, and the other ones in blue are at the police academy. So with a transition, this has been approved through the mayor, and we are transitioning to going to promote, once we get our staffing levels up, we'll have a training sergeant. That training sergeant will take over the training duties that a captain would have done, but also offer some professional development for a regional, we have a regional training cadre. That training sergeant will work with that regional training cadre to make sure they're bringing training to Oak Harbor or our Island County, Skagit County region. Additionally, working with our police academy and our regional police academy that's going to be in Arlington. So they'll also be in charge of accreditation. And then in the future, and this is what was discussed in February, is eventually I'd like to go to a command structure with a deputy chief and 2 lieutenants. So that's taking my captain and turning that to a deputy chief, and then having 2 lieutenants and having proper span of control as we look at what needs do we have with the police department. On that is also the request that I had back in February and in my funding request of 5 new officers and a receptionist. So this year we have had some wonderful community engagement opportunities. So National Night Out was a big hit, and I appreciate everybody that came out for that. We did start a Southwest Business District work group meeting that really is, if you think of SR20 from Cenex, and you go Rite Aid all the way down to the water, all the way to Walmart to Erie Street, that group of people. We have been meeting with that group. We've had 3 meetings. We're going to have another one coming up, and really talking about a lot of the concerns they have. That is the area where Spin Cafe is located. There is some concerns regarding our transient population, concerns with property damage and loitering and vagrancy and just different things like that. So we're addressing that by making sure that we're meeting with them often and making sure we have that connection and open lines of communication, connecting them with services that they need. Again, met with Main Street today, but I've met with them earlier as well, earlier in the year, and I feel like that relationship's going well. And then we've done a couple coffee with a cop events as well in 2023, and we've got one coming up on October 2nd at Starbucks. So if anybody's available, it's from 2 to 4. It's going to be Starbucks South, so the one by Grocery Outlet. Equipment-wise, I want to say, again, thank you very much to the council. Last year, we repurposed some police department funds, and that we purchased our Ballistic Armored Tactical Transport, or the BAT. I still have an open offer to anybody that wants to go drive it. Councilmember Hoffmeyer did go on that road trip, and it was a lot of fun. I've got the picture to show for it. But that vehicle has been used over a dozen times in active high-risk events in Island and Skagit County, and there's been times where people are shooting, not necessarily didn't shoot at the vehicle, but have shot firearms at the officers, those type of things, and it is a valuable, life-saving piece of equipment. Additionally, as the only armored, and remember, this is a civilian purpose-built vehicle. It's the only armored vehicle on the island that we have, and it's been requested down on the south end, different places like that. So it is used, and it is very much appreciated. So thank you very much for that purchase and that approval. We did buy 2 new radar trailers this year, and I'll tell you, those things are pretty awesome. They are out and about. The nice thing about it is we can go and do all the changes and settings remotely. We put them out, and I've had one out for over a couple months. especially with all the regatta roadway projects going on. We get a lot of complaints. We can see the data instantaneously. It works for us and also city engineering. We bought our electric truck, and that goes in for upfitting on September 16th. So I'm excited we'll have that by the end of September and have that on the road. And then I did see that Wendy mentioned P25, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware that P25 purchase in the ARPA funds was for radios. We have made that purchase. We're just waiting for those radios to be delivered, so those funds will be expended. Our digital radio frequency change is still not in place. I talked with ICOM today. They said October 11th is the guaranteed date, and a lot of that is due to their staffing being either sick, unavailable, having some family emergency issues. So. And then I just want to say really quick, we have some challenges at the police department. Again, I've addressed some of those things, which is staffing. We know that there are, we're in talks with the Navy base, and there are, we've been told by NCIS that they can't provide some law enforcement services that they're supposed to provide. So we're looking at what that looks like, and right now they're asking us to assist more with those services, which we'll help with. Additionally, as we looked at the comp plan, it's concerns with city growth and all of that. Additionally, the mental health services and expansion in what that looks like. There is some promising information which the mayor, Sabrina, and I learned about yesterday, which is a 48 to 60 bed facility going into Cedar Woolley, which is for mental health involuntary commitments, which is would be a nice regional resource for us. Again, we have to take people to St. Joe's in Bellingham or Providence otherwise. And then finally, we have regional training needs, and I'll say that picture up there is actually us using the indoor range, the pit, or anchor point, we know it by a few different names. It's currently closed. The owner has allowed us to rent the facility if we need that. We're struggling with ranges in our region, and that's firearms ranges, and we're struggling with emergency vehicle operator courses. And so we're in conversations with the Navy base about what could that look like, and there might be some property here on Whidbey that a driving course for our region could be utilized, which would be pretty awesome in expanding that partnership. So other than that, that's the information I have, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you for all that. When it comes to the crime statistics, I think we all appreciate that. Oak Harbor's always like number one or number two in the state. Yeah. At times, it seems a little too good to be true. And so just as I walk through that for a second, on here with the incident-based reporting, there was a murder or a manslaughter in 23, right?
No, it was 22.
22.
Yeah.
But there's a zero on the port here. Is there? I'm just trying to understand the reporting, so I'm not questioning anything at all.
So this report is the one that we pull from, WASPIC provides this when they put together their crime statistics data from the FBI. So it could have been coded as something else initially. I don't know. I'll look at that and find out.
Understood. And there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, I don't even want to get into the gory detail because there's no point. When we come down here to robbery, 2023, it shows 0. But if we come over here on the call, and I'm sure there's a reason, but if we come over on the call, it shows that there were 4 armed robberies.
Yeah, let me explain those differences and things really quick.
Thank you.
So the difference in the information is the NIBRS reporting is the actual crime that the officer goes, investigates, and then determines this is the crime. The calls for service information, which is what we historically have always provided, we've never provided the NIBRS stuff in past annual reports. So what we provided is the calls for service information. This is the call that as it's dispatched to the officer and how it comes out. So as dispatch receives the information, that's the call for service and how it goes out to the officer. That title doesn't change. We can't change that title. So that's the dispatch calls or incidents that we have. The NIBRS is the actual reporting we do back to the FBI. That's the difference between the two things.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah,
So they are-
that
so-
was my first time
Yeah,
seeing
so
the
they-
neighbors.
They are not going to automatically align. I think we've had some conversations about NIBRS, and I think it's very important for us, with transparency of providing this information. I will find out that information on that death. It could have been 2021, but I know which one we're talking about.
Yeah.
I will say that this year, through tremendous investigation of our Oak Harbor detectives, and the diligence with the Island County Prosecutor's Office, that individual involved in that homicide did plead guilty and was sentenced. Yeah, so I believe I put an email out to City Council for
Yeah.
that. But so that's a tremendous accomplishment through all of that work. It's very unfortunate that we lost a life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all your work on that. Thank you for all theirs. With a lot of these other categories, it has to happen at a higher frequency. But I suppose it's not reported to you all, and that's probably the case nationwide. What efforts can be made to get people to? I'll admit. Here, gosh, a few years ago, somebody broke in the house. Somebody took a safe, had the kids' medicine in it, had jewelry in it. Didn't even bother to call it in. It probably happens with a lot of us. What efforts are there out there to get people to further report stuff?
Definitely. So that's one item in our strategic plan. We're looking about how do we improve our operational efficiencies? How do we improve our communication and response to the community? And we're looking at online reporting as an option. We currently have text to 911. I don't think a lot of people know that. So you don't have to call, you can actually text. And it'll go right to our dispatch center. And if it, just like your normal 911 call, if you're not in our area, it'll go to the dispatch center that you're closest to. And that text to 911 actually is in every county of Washington State. So it just went, every county just signed on or got enabled, I think in July. So pretty cool. And then I think it's really the being out there and being visible and trying to decrease any barriers that we have. I know that there are groups that historically are uncomfortable reporting and talking with the police, so it's really identifying who those groups are so that we can build relationships and trust. It's important.
Well, you're doing a marvelous job. Keep making us all proud.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stuckey.
I feel like you called me before I had my hand up there. Two questions. You're talking about mental health and places that we can take these individuals. Is there any talk with the possible jail situation or with Would Be Health? Is there any possibility of talks of something like that here in the future? I understand it's preliminary, but.
Yeah, so there's always those conversations. I'll say that one, our Island County Jail it's at capacity, it's old, and it doesn't have the facilities that are up to where there's new jail standards that are in talks of what those are supposed to look like. Our facility or the facility at Island County doesn't meet everything there. The sheriff and the commissioners are doing a great job trying to figure out what that solution looks like. And we are in continuous conversation saying, hey, if a new facility is built, we need to be part of that conversation. We should have those resources or have that available locally. As we look at the hospital, there is no mandate that regional hospitals or community hospitals or rural hospitals have bed facilities available. And when you talk about bed facilities, it's not just saying, hey, I have this one room. It's secure access, it's dedicated staff, it's security on scene, and we don't have that at this facility. Now, I've had conversations with elected officials. Can we work on that? Those are needs. And I think that just like we have a TUA, which is our voluntary stabilization center in our community, which is working really well, and I know they want to, expand that to 16 beds, which I support, and I think we all should support. That is a regional resource, and I think what we really need to look at is what are those regional resources, and when we're talking about region, we're talking about like the county next to us, right? So when we're talking about, what's going to be available in Skagit County, and we see that there's this potential 60-bed facility in Cedar Woolley, and I think that is a resource that is close enough to us and could really benefit our region and our community. And a lot of times, because we have a transit system that goes over to Skagit County, doesn't cost anything, though our clientele that maybe might need services like that do transit between areas, so.
My other question involves the staffing slides you put about transitioning to a couple lieutenants and things like that. I thought it was interesting that you put a slide in between current staffing and what you're looking for, and you have a transitional slide. Do you have a time frame you're looking to be in that transitional phase? I mean, I assume it's going to be a little while, otherwise you wouldn't put the slide in.
My hope is to promote that next sergeant this year. There's a couple things that have to happen. One is there's a civil service meeting next week. I have to go to the civil service commissioners, have to approve extending our current sergeant list. Doing a sergeant assessment center is about $8,000, and we have a list that expires this month that I've asked to extend for 6 months. And it would be the same candidates that would be taking a new assessment center. So once I can get that confirmation that we can extend the list, then, and we get a few people off of field training, which is within the next month, we've got 3 people in training, then we'll make that promotion. And then I suspect we'll be in that transition period for at least a year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thank you for that, Chief. I just got a couple questions on the NIBARS report.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of spikes here, destruction of property and, intimidations, another one, 69%. Is that a change in reporting, or, is there a particular thing that's going on in our community that we need to give you a little more support on? What's going on?
No, I think it's one of two things. One is, I think, so the way we've done NIBARS reporting in the past to the FBI has been, I complete a case electronically or with paper. I then turn that packet into my records department, and then they then sort through the case and they pick out all of the factors that get reported to the FBI. The change has been we've gone to a workflow system with electronic forms. The officer now is responsible for marking those NIBARS reporting things. So I believe what we're doing is having more accuracy in reporting because it's being done at the officer level, and then it gets double checked by our record staff. And then I have a third person that does the transmission. So I think that instead of it just being one set of people that are identifying and transmitting, it's 3 different people are in this process, and I think we're just capturing more information.
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping the answer was, right? Because otherwise we got something to address, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then when it comes to drug offenses by type, I just want to make sure I'm clear on stimulants. I'm assuming are like methamphetamine and opiates, where we're seeing mostly fentanyl.
That's correct.
I'm actually kind of surprised to see that there's that much stimulant still is the issue. I thought it was kind of twisting more a little bit towards the opiates.
No, what's that?
Wouldn't the stimulant also be methamphetamine, which is a cheaper, easier access?
So I think
the street?
I think the challenge. Well, I'll say this is an offense could happen. Let's say it's a trespass or a theft. The person's impaired or is presumed impaired based off of the way they're talking to the officer or the way they're acting, and then that's what's recorded on because really the box is, was the person impaired, yes or no, and then there's some other drop-down boxes from that based on that. So.
Well, obviously, reports like this just help us understand, what you're dealing with in the community, right, and where we can provide, that additional support. So
Definitely.
Appreciate the time.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate the report, and I'm excited to hear about the potential beds in Cedar-Woolley.
Yeah.
That'll be excellent. That's, I think, a much-needed resource that we need in all of northwestern Washington as well. So, because that'll fill up fast, because we are also partnering with they'll be partnering with Whatcom County as well.
They will,
I'm sure is that. So my other question for you is, how much is the pit?
It's $3 million.
Oh, ouch. Okay.
So
I just was curious.
I mean, I have full transparency. I have taken some elected officials out there. We've done 3 trips to it. We are looking as a regional group of law enforcement executives, what are our options. There will be a request made to our legislators this session for some funding, and I'm hoping that can come through Oak Harbor. It is in our city. I know that the sheriff has said he's willing to make that request, but I really hope that that would be something that council would like to endorse and make that request as well, and have that come through us since it's our facility, or it's in our facility.
Yeah, you have my support on that for sure. I think that's if we can keep the training close by, bring in revenue from other agencies coming in to help support and whatnot, it's just smart.
There has been questions of, can that be a police department? And there would need to be a lot of additions. You know, our requirements for a police department are more than just a piece of space, that we have a lot of other requirements. Additionally, if you make that a police department, it now becomes not a training space. And I think that training spaces are just as important in this region as we can't send everybody down to Seattle or Burien. That is extremely challenging. And so there's a lot of unfunded training mandates, and having something like this is very unique and a great opportunity for us.
And I would imagine there's grants potentially available through federally as well as the state that might be able to help.
Wendy is working very hard for those things.
She's amazing. So.
Yeah. Now, I will say, I think I saw on there was like $2.3 million of ARPA money not spent. So if we want to repurpose that to some training space, that wouldn't be bad.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your report.
Anyone else?
Mayor, may I just add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Which is, I just need to thank.
I was going to talk, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I just want to thank Meg Massey, my administrative assistant, for putting this together. She did that really well and in a short timeline, so I appreciate that.
So if council is willing to sign a letter of support, we will have staff draft that. We are currently working with county, with Sheriff Leachy's office, as well as Dave Paul's office, and we're trying to figure out ways to potentially make this work. So in addition to that, we are also having early conversations with the different commissioners about a new jail facility that would be here on the island that we would be partners in as well. So those are all, but we're really early in the discussions in that. So, but that is something that we're working on as well. I want to commend you on your accreditation again. That's great. A lot of these folks up here don't realize, how hard you worked on that. So thank you. And thank you again for always being a very positive partner to the other departments within the city. Everyone enjoys working with you. So, and you're always quick to give everyone credit. So thank you for that. The last thing I will leave us with before I say goodbye is City Administrator Combs and I both just recently graduated from the Citizens Academy, so I would challenge all of you to do the same. It gives you a deeper understanding and appreciation for what they go through and what they do for our community. So with that, there's no